Martyn Sibley, welcome to the Marketing Study Lab podcast.
Awesome, thanks for having me on.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to this. But just because I'm looking forward to it doesn't mean you get away with it without a random opener. So my random opener, and I have no idea where this come from, believe me. It might have even been something you wrote a long, long time ago. But my random opener is, imagine you've just won a gold medal. What's it in?
So my gold medal, well, there's so many different things they take through life, but I'm going to go with changing the world for accessibility.
Love it. I think you pretty much got that gold medal, to be fair.
Or retain it.
Yeah, absolutely. You've retained it. You the Usain Bolt of gold medal accessibility winning. Fantastic. Okay, so let's put that into some context. What's your story? What's brought you to this stage of your career, and what are you up to right now?
Sure. So I think that first thing I was mentioned is I have a disability. And as we'll get into the chat, it certainly is not something that I have let define me or dictate my life, but it is quite a severe disability that I do use a wheelchair all my waking hours. I have a team of carers to support with the very most basic of daily living. So, and even just getting out and about, that access to buildings and transport and the attitudes of people towards disability, that's all directly impacted my experience on earth so far, because of that, partly because of the fact I have a disability. But I grew up in Cambridgeshire. I went to mainstream school, so I'm probably one of the sort of first generation, I'm mid-30s, where it was much more, if possible, that disabled students could go to school with non-disabled students. And of course, there still are special schools, as they're sometimes known today, that are where someone has very complex disabilities and maybe learning disability and accessing the curriculum is more difficult. But for me, with a physical disability, I went on, got GCSEs, got A-levels, went to university in Coventry where I did economics and a master's in marketing. So sort of background very much in business and marketing. And the difficulty was less about the curriculum or the education, but more around the support I needed at university. And then, career-wise, I worked for a charity, for disability charity, for 5 years, like grounding in disability rights, disability inclusion. Left in 2011 for an entrepreneurial adventure that is still running, and co-founded some things like magazine, became a well-known blogger in my sphere. And more recently, I'm running a influencer social media marketing agency.
That's brilliant. Nicely well-rounded story there. It's excellent. So let's dive straight into some actionable tips about inclusive marketing. So I think for me, and probably for most, we don't really cater for inclusive marketing in our plans, in our portfolio, simply because it might not be on our agenda, as we kind of feel like we're decent human beings anyway, and we like to include everybody and not exclude anyone. But kind of in doing this, are we sort of missing the point? And what sort of elements should we be including in our plan so that we're doing it right?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I just want to touch on is obviously around products and services. So there was a point where disabled people, we were more in care homes, sort of segregated, and independent living wasn't really a thing, and there was no legal protection. So when we look at disability rights, it's gone from very medical model, very segregated, and now thankfully there's more of a social approach. That part of the reason many people are disabled is the barriers that are in society, and if we pull down those barriers, then there is no exclusion or no disability. There's just ability. So I think that that's helpful, because now what we see is that more and more brands are either making their offerings more inclusive and more accessible, or they already had features and benefits that were applicable to parts of the disabled or all of the disabled community. So when we move into the marketing, I think that we want to look at brands should be inclusive where there's universal design. So, you know, if a smartphone is created where you've considered all aspects of the marketplace, that would include people with disabilities. And so you try to make the product or service as all encompassing, as useful to everyone that's possible. So I think that's something we have to draw a line around as something that's been getting better. And therefore inclusion is that the product or service can be used by everybody. So with marketing, it's similar but different, because we also, like you say, you know, no one would obviously or on purpose leave people out, and no one's a bad person at the core, really. It's often just a lack of awareness or a lack of thought to any given situation like disability. And I think we can extrapolate this conversation to diversity and inclusion. But the reason, and obviously now more as a blogger with a disability and running an agency with disabled influencers, the reason you still need that focus, it should never ever be tokenism. It's always part of a bigger holistic strategy. But now with social media and the content that people create more than ever, is we all as individuals resonate with people just like us. And that word of mouth that is, you know, exploding through the internet and the use of influencers is only ever going to work when there is that niche content to niche audiences at scale, which is very much what our sister agency, the GOAT agency, talk about. So I think we do need more representation of disabled people in advertising for the business case and for the moral case and for the legal case. But in the end, it's no different to working with mum influencers on the kind of products that are going to resonate with mums and kids in that market. It's just another community, basically.
Yeah. Can you, off the top of your head, think of any product, service, or companies that either do this universal design well or have learnt from past mistakes or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious one is the smartphones, particularly looking at iPhone. And I understand actually that Siri was created and innovated more for people with disabilities, in particular for blind people. So that actually was where a feature or a product as well came out of trying to solve things better for disability. But it ended up having a mass market adoption. But yeah, I think that a lot of the tech companies have caught on that if they have universal design, it is better for everybody. And that's a definite good use case, I would say.
I mean, you usually when you look at that and making it something that suits everybody, you start to go down a simpler design, and that's what people want. They don't want more friction. They just want something that works easier and more efficiently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's that, and that, I mean, that was just a research. I can't exactly remember, you know, who provided it. I did, it was sort of one of those ad hoc colloquial bits of research I read years ago. But the point of it is quite powerful. That there was an entrance to a building, and on the left there was a ramp, and on the right there was steps, and majority of people took the ramp, even if they weren't in a wheelchair or with some mobility difficulty. And that exactly encompasses universal design.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a brilliant example. I love that. So one thing that might scare people, if you like, is saying the wrong thing, using the wrong phrase, and I suppose, or potentially, you might see that a lot more than other people. How can we make sure that within our marketing and what we do professionally, we don't offend? Or is this sort of the problem? People's mindset straight away are, we don't want to offend.
Yeah, I mean, since we've launched Purple Goat, which is basically the client-facing side of this inclusion journeys. Obviously, it started, I have a disability. I've been involved in blogging and running a magazine. So we were very good and still are facing community side, the disability side. But the bit we struggled was, how do we get brands to embrace disabled people? Well, actually, it's the business case. There's 1.3 billion people with a disability, and that equates to about $8 trillion global spending. So the business case is massive. But, and it comes to your point about fear, why are brands not embracing this market? Because it's not total lack of awareness. We all agree it's not being horrible. Like that's, we all agree with that. But then it's not just lack of awareness, because there is more awareness the last 10, 20 years around disability and inclusion in the business case. Actually, the other objection, if you like, I'm seeing when I'm speaking to brands at the moment is that fear. And so something that we've done to try and overcome that is to say, well, look, okay, we get it. If you've done some really good stuff for disabled people as a brand, and then you do a marketing campaign, there's sort of this weird fear that if one disabled person has an issue with that, that it's going to be far worse than in a non-disabled advertising campaign, where we know what the internet's like. We know not every customer is going to be happy, and that's a fact that we all try to, you know, solve and have better customer service and take feedback and all the sort of things that all good brands should be doing. But in the end, there are trolls and there are people online that that's just going to happen. So it's very interesting that there's this fear that if a disabled person disagrees with the notion that a brand is more accessible, that somehow is even worse and a PR nightmare. It is a bit laughable, because like, it's just, that's just marketing 101. That's just part of the process. So what we're doing to de-risk that for the brand is doing a sort of community checking service. So rather than the brand or the agency, and even though I'm disabled and a lot of Purple Goat's team has a disability, we're still a marketing agency that facilitates this. So we will then do surveys, questionnaires, focus groups, and say to the community, what of these sort of brand initiatives would you like to have heard more about? Because very often, a lot of the marketplace, disabled people didn't know that a brand has installed high state-of-the-art accessible toilets and this kind of stuff. If you don't tell people, you don't market it, no one knows about it. And so, yeah, we found that to be a really powerful one of our services, is that if we get that insight and the community signs it off, if down the road there's any backlash, well, actually, there was due diligence and the community signed it off in the first place. So I think that's been quite a powerful way of overcoming that fear.
And I think in doing that, you do what any decent agency, any decent marketer should, and start with the research and start with the actual people.
Yes.
You know,
it is marketing. My master's was in marketing. Day one, you ask your audience what they want, you create it, and then you tell them you've created it. It's that simple. But no one dares do it around disability. And as I said, it's because of the charity model. It was all, please donate now for poor disabled people that need these services. And it was, you know, no visibility in the streets and in the media, but that's changed now. So I feel the last frontier is the marketing. And the more that, the really powerful thing with Purple Goat is that we're talking about the money. We're not saying it's just the moral or the legal. We're talking to marketing directors and CEOs, even finance officers, you know, financial directors, and saying, if you do this right, if a supermarket, say, it's a good example, there's 1.2 million wheelchair users in the UK. So it's, say, one of the leading supermarkets at the moment has 200,000 wheelchair users as shoppers. And if you do some things, which very often the supermarkets have done it already, and you then do a proper marketing campaign about it, what if you ended up with 350,000 of wheelchair users shopping at your supermarket? the lifetime value of an extra 150,000 shoppers is astronomical. And that's it. I mean, that for me sums up the missed opportunity, but it is that fear that we're dealing with here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like the fact that you went back to the whole charitable kind of concept and the way it used to be seen, and just bizarre how that all came about. And I suppose it's got loads of historical context and everything like that. But on the same respect, it's a case of just doing the right thing. And I've tried my best to avoid just talking to you about standard marketing, because you know it, I know it, and the listeners know
That's
that.
the
And this
easy
isn't,
bit.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And picking your brains about standard marketing isn't getting the best out of you, you know.
And it's
Far
all
from
there.
it.
Like, we do wicked content creation and we amplify it, and we do analytics. Like, yeah, it's all there. It's all part of what what generally needs to be done to include disabled people in marketing. But yeah, as you say, that the objection from brands and the fear, the problem is the fear. So that's the main bit we're trying to tackle. But it's a dominoes as well. I mean, they did the Maltesers ad. Many people probably remember. It was 2016, and it was all off the back of the Paralympic sort of movement in 2012 that changed the narrative. I often talk about Seth Godin, who I was fortunate enough on a fanboy level to interview on my podcast.
Fantastic.
I was like trying to keep my stuff together, But yeah, he talks about marketing as a vehicle to change the narrative. And I mean, in a way, as much as I do love marketing in its own right, and I'm passionate for the mechanics as much as the social and cultural levels, for me as a disabled person, it's that storytelling that we can change that narrative of what it means to be disabled. And so, yeah, back to that Malteser ad, Mars reported a massive boost in sales, and they felt it was attributed to that advert. So the ROI of that advert that they did in partnership with Scope was huge, but they never did it again. And that's so we're trying to reignite. What if we did those sort of, I don't know if you remember, Peter, but it was quite a saucy and sassy advert. It was quite almost sexual with the disabled people in it. And so, yeah, I'd like, what if there was a social campaign, an influencer campaign that did that? So we're resurrecting that idea and having some talks about that with Mars. But if that's the only advert we can think of with disabled people, and that was 4 years ago, it absolutely echoes and mirrors our research, which is 0.06% of adverts feature disability, yet 22% of the population has a disability. So there's a stark gap there.
Yeah. Was that the advert with was it a hearing aid, or
there was a series? So there was okay. But the one, because I interviewed one of them on my daily live stream that I've been doing, and she's a wheelchair user, and yeah, it was just very sort of innuendo and a bit telling her friends about a night with a lover sort of stuff, is that kind of thing.
Yeah, got it. Fantastic. And like I say, it's a shame things like that don't carry on as such, because if you're building that brand and you're building an already established brand like Maltesers or Mars or whoever it is, then that's a path that they've gone on, and to not continue it seems a disservice to everybody involved, to be fair,
and themselves, arguably.
Yeah. Massively, absolutely.
And I'm not like, when I've been involved in basic rights around healthcare for disabled people and social care and independent living, even when it's that kind of political and that fundamental, I still have never been the angry militant activist. I always believe in finding common ground and working together. And you start to sound a bit cliche, but it's true that that for me has always been the way. And so even with this more in the business world and the marketing world, like, I'm not throwing stones at Mars here, like, but I just think they're missing out on the social good the brand awareness, but the product acquisition benefits of a new audience.
Mm. Do you find that from a business and a social context, it's seen slightly different? So the way you would interact socially with people that might work for a company would be hugely different than if you were in a business scenario.
Yeah. I mean, again, it comes back to the history that, you had charities that were delivering vital services. I mean, I always say, like, when I talk about the charity model in a slightly negative way, like, we still need charities today, disability and non-disability, to fill where public and private sector aren't providing solutions. And the way that's funded is through donations. I think social enterprise is probably where we're seeing the two worlds combining. So I think historically you had the social change, the political lobbying, that side, and then over there you had the business, and they never saw disabled people as a viable market. But the two are becoming one, and that for me is the solution that we're driving. So Purple Goat, we're not a charity. I'm still hoping to grow it and buy a villa in Spain when I retire. And, I'm an entrepreneur, right? I need to pay my mortgage, and I'm getting married. And so, and that's an important point for me as a disabled person. For other disabled people, want to get education and access to work opportunities and stuff. So we're sort of piecing together decades, if not generations, of things that need changing. And there's a lot of dots need to join from different angles. Like, the government fund my wheelchair and my care team. So if that was cut or stopped, I've not got the ability to run Purple Goat. So there are these different plates spinning. But where we are today on a pure business marketing level, the way the green movement sort of harnessed the power of green branding to make the environment more sustainable, but also to see a pure profit, benefit from different products and different marketing with that audience, that customer base. I sort of think purple branding is the new green branding, and we can explore the color purple a bit if that's beneficial for your listeners.
Yeah, I absolutely go into that. So I think everybody, if you said the word green, the color green, we all know what that means within a business, within a marketing context.
Yeah.
What's the purple? Because just to let you know that I come from near Liverpool. Okay. I live near Liverpool, and they have this thing. I think there was even a banner at a football game, and it just said "purple bins" on it. And because Liverpool, Everton, two football clubs, they didn't want a blue bin, they didn't want a red bin, so they went with purple. So purple bins, where I come from, is like, it's just a funny thing. But moving that to one side, from a business context, what are we talking about when we talk about the colour purple?
Yeah, but you could certainly argue that the inclusive nature of not putting out Liverpool fans or Everton fans, but purple is for everybody. I mean, there's maybe we may be shoehorning it, but maybe there's a
you're probably right. You're probably right.
But the origins were. I mean, you said about what was the one we just said before? Was it because I was going to mention the pink pound and the silver pound? Oh yeah, we were talking about green, weren't we?
Yeah, green.
Yeah, sort of green, but also pink, and I think that sort of other colours have references and similarities with different audiences. So yeah, purple represents the disabled consumer market. Apparently, it came more in the disability rights world, and there was a tagline called "Nothing about us without us," and we use that at Purple Goat. So it feels like the political and the legal fight took place sort of in the 90s, really, and before, like leading up to that. And since we've got the Discrimination Act, which is now the Equalities Act, and the general awareness of it, I do think the business cases where we're at, sort of certainly the 2000s onwards. But in terms of quantifying, there's a lot about the purple pound. So the value of disabled consumers or a household with a disabled person in it is 249 billion a year. Wow. So the government talks a lot about the purple pound and purple talent, but yeah, it's a colour that's just become related to the disability market, or indeed just disabled people, really.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Thank you for clarifying that. Just want to shift conversation for a second. And one way you've managed to get your voice heard is by storytelling, sharing your story, documenting your life, basically. It's fantastic. So links are in the show notes, but anybody that's interested, check out the website, check out Martyn's website, and it's full of interesting photos and things that he's been doing. And even in my intro to the podcast, I mentioned about climbing trees and all that kind of stuff. For someone looking to get their own voice heard, what tips do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the smartphones we all have in our pockets, like the hardware and then all of the internet and the software we have at our fingertips, everything you need is there. So really, I would say it's just the action, it's the doing. And of course, as marketers, we do a bit of the thinking and a bit of the strategy. And so obviously for me, I was very much thinking that I wanted to inspire when I started my blog in 2009 now, which is scarily 11 years ago. I wanted particularly to inspire younger disabled kids that, when they grow up, they can do all the things they dream of, and that don't let other stereotypes tell them otherwise. And so I was giving talks in little workshops and all that sort of stuff with charities. But I then found that blogging was the way to do that. So when I approached my content, it was like, well, the audience is younger disabled people. The content itself is my lived experiences of working, traveling, dating back in the day when I was single. And so, yeah, obviously I'm just giving that context to me, because anyone listening, they may not have a disability, they may not be looking even to talk about their own life situation, but it always comes back to what's the sort of audience you're trying to impact, what's the effect you want them to have from your content. And then really, without then overcomplicating it too much, you just start to find inspiration from things you do, things you hear, conversations you have. Maybe have a little notebook or, a note document on your phone just to jot those ideas down. But I did make a real effort to, I'm trying to remember now if it was every day, but I made a real commitment to post really regularly and really consistently. So that would be all about content in terms of find the right platform that's for you, find the right messages and curate your own voice, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But my 3-step strategy in the big picture is tell your story, build your community, and have your call to action. So once you've got your content flowing, you also want to be going out on social media to that audience and not selling your wares and not promoting your content, but genuinely, authentically taking an interest. So I would come home from my day job, look at hashtag disability on Twitter. It was probably before Facebook groups, but more recently you'd go into the relevant Facebook groups, but ultimately learn about what the community is feeling and thinking, and share and congratulate people and basically network. And so what happened for me was the content was going, I was building up network and friendships, to be honest, in the disability world. And then the third point, the call to action, it might be come to my meetup, might be subscribe to my mailing list. But if you do those 3 points in really consistent, regular ways, it grows over time. And I've now been voted Britain's 3rd most influential disabled person. And it's totally testament to a mentor that taught me those 3 strategic steps back in 2009 and just sticking with it over years, really.
Only number 3. We need to get you to number 1, really, don't we?
I know. I've been voted as I'm back in the finalists this year. Hey. So let's see what happens.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, fingers crossed, and all those well wishes
Yeah,
for everyone
definitely.
that's taken part. But more importantly, you. No, forget everyone else. Just you. Let's get you. Let's get you that
Peter,
number
I
one.
only do it for the awards, you know
Yeah, yeah,
that.
absolutely. I know you said that before we started recording, and I wasn't going to bring it up, but you brought it up. Excellent. Right. I think now's a good time to move on to some quick fire questions.
Sure.
Okay. So, what's that source of info you can't live without?
Oh, it's so, because that is a great question because there's so much information.
Yeah.
I talk about the sort of information diet. Um, if I just tell you what I'm reading at the moment that I love,
Yeah. Cool.
I've subscribed to Marketing Brew, which is
Okay.
part of Morning Brew, which is based in the US. And so it's a daily newsletter of like really sort of non-formal, non-corporate sense of humor. It's
Mm,
sort of got my style, but it's also got all the latest marketing information. So on a pure marketeer's level, I would say that. And then from disability, it would be influencers, the general
mm,
disabled influencers that I always learn from and I'm inspired by every day.
cool. What's the last thing you remember Googling?
Oh, great questions. I love these. It was for an infrared sauna. Quite random. So
I love it.
my fiance, do you want the context or am I just
Oh,
giving the answer?
I think you're going to have to.
So my fiance is very into natural health and was sort of talking about infrared saunas being generally good, but with my disability, they could be
Hmm.
quite good. So I Googled the infrared sauna, this particular product, and then just to like see how my entrepreneurial hustle is always there, I'm pretty much there with getting a gifted sauna in return for creating content for it.
I like it. Nice one. That's the way we should all do business.
Yeah.
Anyway, uh, if you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
So when people ask me how I'm inspired to keep running the businesses and to keep blogging, it's always for that sort of 10 to 15-year-old me. Like
Hmm.
everything I'm saying is partly of that. If you're a disabled person of that age, I want to get that message over. But yeah, I mean, the general points would just be like, don't give up on your dreams, just dream big. There'll always be barriers, disabled or not, but like there's always solutions.
Hmm.
And the book that I wrote is called Everything is Possible, and that would be the fundament of my message.
Cool. What's the most important thing for people to know about marketing right now?
It's an extremely powerful way to change the world for the better while also having your villa in Spain.
It's all about that villa in Spain and that sauna and the awards, isn't it?
Yeah, and the awards, exactly.
It all comes back to the awards. Okay, final and most important question, Martyn. If people want to find out more about you, what you do, how you help others, where should they go?
Yeah, thank you. So my blog is martynsibley.com. Double check the spelling because it's Martin with a Y.
Yeah.
Um, Disability Horizons, if anyone's disabled or knows anyone with a disability, that's the magazine we've been running since 2011. So that's just very much tips and advice for disabled people. If you're in marketing world, whether you're a brand or an agency and looking for support in untapping the potential of the disabled consumers, then Purple Goat is very much what we're up to. And I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, but one of my other entrepreneurial ventures was an accessible travel website called Accomable, and we sold it to Airbnb. So Airbnb have now got more filters and information for disabled tourists, which we're very proud of because, you know, it is mission driven.
Hmm.
And I think until the last year or two, the business side's kicked in, and it's nice that the business side kicked in. But to know that someone like me can now travel more easily and find accessible accommodation is good. So even out of interest, just check out Airbnb for their filters for disabled people. And I'm cooking an idea around transport now as well.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. Martyn, thank you so much for joining me today. Absolute pleasure to have you on. Fantastic stuff.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it, Peter.